You know those stories about overnight success? Yeah, this ain't one of them. This is a story about raw hustle, creativity, and the relentless pursuit of something bigger. Welcome to My Life After, the podcast where we dive into stories of transformation, resilience, and reinvention. I'm your host, Steve Joseph, and this is the story of SQRA. From printing and selling bootleg Leonardo DiCaprio posters, autographed by himself, of course, to scraping by with just $200 in his bank account, a mortgage to pay, and a wedding around the corner, SQRA has seen rock bottom. But instead of folding, he flipped the script. Fast forward to today, and his art is selling for over $50,000 a piece. His work is a raw mix of street energy and fine art, blending culture, rebellion, and a deep love for the grind. Whether you've seen his pieces in high-end collections or scrolling through Instagram, one thing's clear: SQRA is an artist who never stopped betting on himself. So how does a kid faking DiCaprio signatures go from broke to selling art for five figures? Let's dive in.
You ready to kick things off?
Yeah, let's do
Okay.
it.
Cedric, how would you describe the art that you do?
In a nutshell, I would probably describe the art form as contemporary pop art time capsules. So, what I really try to venture out to do is kind of recapture, the nostalgic magic of what formed our collective youth. Well, for my generation, it's really like 80s, 90s, 2000s type based, but I really try to capture as much as possible in camera the cultural phenomenons that kind of like formed our pop culture dialogue today, So whether I'm shooting cereal boxes or Coke cans or books or shoes or whatever it might be, it's really supposed to give you that sense of walking down memory lane. You know what I mean?
And why would you say it's important to resurrect the 80s and 90s and 2000s? I mean, 80s and 90s, that was kind of my core youth, right? So when I
Sure.
saw your work, it definitely was a time capsule for me. It showed me a
Right
lot of
on.
things that my family couldn't afford for me when I was young. Like
Yeah.
nice shoes, nice toys, all of those things. And it's funny, like even my daughter, she'll want shoes and Air Jordans and flights and whatnot. And of course, you try and do your best for your child. But
Of course.
to this day, I never have them. She has them. I still can't bring myself to buy myself a pair of
Yeah, man. No, it's embedded in us. I find it funny though, because I find a lot of like my generation at least, I'm 35, almost 36, but a lot of my generation now I see them like as they grow up, they're really collecting a lot of like what they couldn't afford, as kids. So it's
hmm
interesting, but I think it's important to recapture this type of memorabilia, these type of collectibles, or just all sorts of different items because well, for a lot of different reasons like we do the books because in many years I have a feeling the books will be extinct completely, so that's number one for the books. um for the shoes, the toys, whether it's Barbie or Bear Brick or Cause or whatever it is, I think it's an important cultural note as to like where we are right now. Because just like Andy Warhol kind of used like the pop culture icons of his time, we've passed the superstar stage, like people aren't so fascinated anymore by celebrities because everybody has their 15 minutes these days thanks to Instagram and TikTok and all that. So it's important for me to capture um you know different collections in order to show off, like I said, like what formed our collective pop culture consciousness that's like really seeped into our everyday lives. But when we say like why the 80s, why the 90s, why the 2000s, like even the 2000s are moving so fast, man. It's moving so fast. And
Yeah.
so we're just kind of like churning through all of this different, all these different phenomena. Like in my time, like Pokemon was super popular. Yu-Gi-Oh was super popular. Like cereal box characters and mascots were super popular. And then today, when you look at it, it's like, okay, well now we know that cereal isn't healthy. So kids are not eating as much cereal. They don't know these characters maybe as much as they did before. Like my daughter, who's 4 years old, doesn't know any of these serial characters because the serial has changed so much. But like when I was 4 years old, man, like I was planted in front of the like television with the box of cereal right in front of me, and I was reading the box and going through it and trying to find the prizes in it. It was so cool. And she's never really going to get that touch and feel. And it's the same thing even for like the VHS, for example. Like my daughter will never know what it is to go into a Blockbuster on a Friday or Saturday night to pick out that one perfect VHS and pop it in. And then like when it's perfect, pause it and then have to rewind it manually. She'll never know that feeling. And that's a big reason why I collect VHS myself, because hopefully, God willing, if I ever have the space, I'd like to build an in-house Blockbuster so she can come in and kind of like navigate and get that feeling. Because and it's not just exclusive to my kids, it's exclusive I mean, it's really applies to all children, but they will never understand what it is not to have Netflix, not to be able to scroll, not to be able to pause and rewind and fast forward on demand. They'll never understand that because simply they're not born into it. And so these type of tapestries that I create with all this pop culture, like with all these pop culture collectibles, will give them, that intrigue to ask the questions that they need to ask in order to understand our time better.
You know what? And it's funny you mentioned that in regards to your daughter. When my daughter was 4, we went skiing in Mont Tremblant, and we stayed at an
Mhm.
Airbnb. And they had a DVD player, not a video one, but
Nice.
the Wi-Fi went out, and so they had the Airbnb just had some old kids movies, Disney movies. So we were watching one, and there was a scratch, so it started skipping, and the
Mhm.
first thing out of her mouth was poor connection. And I'm like, no, there's there's no connection.
There is no connection.
when so when I look at your art, and when I think about the 80s and 90s, and even 2000s to maybe the 2010s, right before the smartphone really came into our lives,
Yeah.
I think of how much of a process it was to realize things and to build things. So one example I'll give you is, you know, just say you're working out in the gym building muscle. The longer it takes to build muscle, the longer that muscle will be there even when you stop working out, versus
Absolutely.
guys who, or people who do steroids, you'll get muscle a lot quicker, but the moment you get off, it goes, right? And I
Yeah, yeah.
and I find art, and whether it's visual or music or whatever nowadays, is created so quickly. The process is so uh, streamlined, and a lot of technology is involved to release things quicker. You don't have to, if you're a music artist, you don't have to wait for 12 songs to release an album. You just release one by one by one on
Sure.
Spotify. But
Sure.
when I look at art in the 80s, or just 80s and 90s in general, to uh, become a performer, you had to go through the ringer, and you have a beautiful piece of Michael Jackson and various collage of his life behind you.
Thanks.
um, that when you were able to listen to Michael Jackson, for me, it meant I had to take 2 buses from a suburb of Toronto, the subway,
Yeah,
go
man.
to the record store, wait in line. And I saved up all that money, whatever it was, $6 to get the tape. And then I'd go back with the thrill, because I didn't even have a Walkman at the time, right? So I'd be going back with this, my heart racing, the 2.5 hours back home just to listen to this. And
Yeah,
so
man.
now you're collecting. When I see your pieces and you put that all together, I'm like, wow, that's a lot of those trips to experience that movie or to experience that art too. So I think it represents a very analog time in our
Yeah, absolutely.
civilization, right? And that's what I draw from it when I see your stuff. And you're right, it is a time capsule, because we are entering a time where I think eventually one day maybe we turn the tables and say, you know what, we need to have a certain way of cutting things off and just doing some analog things like your
Yeah,
your video store.
yeah,
How did your background and your upbringing kind of bring you to where you are today? Like, you're from Montreal originally?
yeah, yeah, from Montreal. So just a couple of things that I want to touch on what you said before I answer your question directly. I think what you're saying really hits it on the head, man. I think that today people don't understand the value in physical media, and when you have these massive media corporations that control the content that you can consume or even access. you're getting into a dangerous time because it starts to influence the general the general um, mindset of the youth. You won't see these older movies, for example. It's very rare that you get like the classics like suggested to you on Netflix, etc. Because they're always going to suggest the newest films that Netflix produces. But you're never going to never are you going to sign on to Netflix and they're going to suggest that you watch Raging Bull, or that they're going to suggest that you watch, Chinatown or Casablanca, or any amazing film. But so I just to touch on that for sure, man. I remember when I used to I used to also buy like records and CDs and like all that stuff. And when like video games, even physical video games, which they still sell today, but it's less and less rare. But I remember getting that box and just staring at it and like reading it like 50 times over in my bed and being so excited to like wake up the next morning and pop it in. So yes, to everything you said, man, totally, totally feel you. In regards to how I got here and like what my academic background is in finance. I studied finance at Concordia University. I hated it the entire way through. The only reason I did it was because I have an amazing family, a very supportive family. I'm very thankful for them. But like many other families who are, I won't say not creative, because my mother is in fact an artist, so she always understood. But my father is more of an analytical uh, type of personality, and for him, he didn't really understand what it means to be an artist. And so because of that, and I respect my father tremendously. He's an amazing man. But because of that, I kind of pursued the academic path just to have a fallback plan. But in my mind, I never really had a fallback because a, a, I never had a plan B because I never really had a plan A. To
Mm-hmm.
tell you the truth, it's like I didn't go to school in finance saying, well, if I don't become an artist, then at least I can be an investment advisor, or go into wealth management or whatever it is, right? I was never going to get a job at the bank. It just doesn't fit my profile. I was in my early 20s. I can't remember exactly. I was living in Los Angeles, and I worked for a man named Steve Rennie. And Steve, they called him Ren Man in school. So he had a internet show called Red Man MB, which stood for music and business, or music business rather. And on that show, I learned a very important lesson. And I mean, we used to listen to like all the top bigwigs from the music industry come through, and they were talking about what it took to make it in the music industry, and like the actual practice of music business and all that jazz. And in that job, I learned that it doesn't matter what you're doing. What really matters is the attitude in like that you employ while doing the things that you may or may not enjoy. Because even if you don't enjoy something, but you give it everything that you've got, then suddenly you start to derive the elixir from that lesson. Because everything in life is pretext. It's
I think the next thing that I would ask is if I were to talk to, young Cedric, who's maybe 8 or 9,
yeah,
what did that Cedric kind of have in him to say, hey, look, I'm going to follow the path that my parents put before me. My parents very similar. I think a lot of old school parents are, you have a higher probability of just getting a stable, steady job if you just go to
yeah.
school and do one of the business, engineering,
No
medicine.
such thing, by the way. No such
Yeah,
thing. No
exactly,
such thing.
exactly. I lost my job in November, right? And
Yeah.
very that's the world. And actually, to your point, where you are doing something that is maybe just not your final chapter, that you're not enjoying, and just to kind of stick with it, eventually just uh, the universe, God, whatever your kind of guiding compass is in life, it just shows you in different ways that, hey, you're meant to do something else, or you're meant to be somewhere else. And being a creator is definitely a vocation as well, right?
Sure.
I mean, it's not
Sure.
just physical art, but it is just putting something out there. So going back to you, was there something you saw in 8-year-old or 9-year-old Cedric that said, "Hey, my compass in life is guiding me in this way, but what was that kind of core instinct in
Right.
you that made you feel like, okay, I'm going to do this, and if that doesn't work, I'm going to do this,
Yeah.
and keep going."
If I look back, man, like I always had a pencil in my hand,
Hmm.
you know, and so I was always drawing, and it didn't matter if it was good or bad. It was just I was always figuring out a way to express myself. I was writing fan fiction for stories that I loved. I was doing so much. You know, I have a great story for you, in fact, and it'll really illustrate like who I am. When I was in grade one, okay, uh, my parents got called into the principal's office, and I was sitting there. I remember with the principal in front of me. My parents walk in, they sit down, they said, "Listen, we have a serious conversation to have with you." Parents look, "All right, lay it on me." They're like, "Are you guys missing any money? Are you missing any money from, your wallet or, like wherever?" And they go, "No, why?" Well, "We found $80 in your son's desk, like we opened it up and in his pencil, he had $80 in cash." Remember, this is 1990, right? So
Yeah,
sorry, not, this is 1990, 95, 96, I don't know, something like that, right? And so, yeah, I don't even know how much that's worth today, adjusted for inflation, but it's probably at least 200, $250,
yeah, yeah.
So you have a kid who has $250, right? Looking at, well, $80, whatever, for conversation. And my parents are like, "No, I mean, we're not missing a thing." You go, "How'd you get the money?" So they pressured me, right, into telling them how I got the money. And what I ended up telling them was that my family had recently bought a printer, right? And there was a black and white printer, and there was like color cartridges as well. If you had the money for the color cartridges, so it
Yeah.
was very seldom that we were ever able to use them. But Titanic had just come out, so there you go. That'll give us a timeline, right, on when this was, because I can't remember exactly. But Titanic had just come out, and Leonardo DiCaprio was all the rage with all the girls, right? So I actually printed out photos from Titanic in black and white, and I sold them for $1. And I printed out color pages. I sold them for $2, and then I printed out color pages and then autographed them as Leonardo, and I would sell them for $3. I mean, we're in grade one, right? So like the imagination is a little wild.
That's
So I,
amazing.
I would I would sell this for $3, man. And so that's how I accrued that money. But what I noticed about myself is that my entire life, man, my entire life, I have been selling photos. And whether it's, I was selling photos of Leonardo DiCaprio from Titanic in grade one. When I got to high school, I was selling bootleg, DVDs, that I would download, or that, I would get cans and put them on DVDs or VHS, transfer manually. I would sell those. And then I became a photographer, and then a videographer, and then an artist. And I realized that in every single thing that I did, whether I was a graphic designer, or, like I was coaching, or I was, doing illustrations, or I was doing physical art, or shooting videos, or my entire life, all I've ever been doing is selling photos. And whether they're moving or still, it's all I've ever been doing my entire life. So I noticed that pattern early on, and I kind of like tripled down on it. But in any case, a businessman from Miami, his name is Phil. Phil was doing a dating app called Be My Guest, which was basically an app where you could, like, if you say you were a woman and I'm a man, right? I could send you a rose, and basically, like, you as a woman would log onto the app, you would pick 10 places that you'd like to go out on a date, and as a man, I could see the places that you want to go. I would send you a rose token and offer to pay for the meal to take you out to the place that you like to go for your first date. So I was working on this app, and the execution was awesome. My partner at the time was so happy. Phil was so happy that he said, "Why don't you go to Miami and take the keys to my penthouse and at the Mondrian, enjoy yourself for a week. You deserve it." So I was really appreciative. And when I got there, I opened the front door, and the second I got into the apartment, there were these massive tapestries. And I'm talking like oversized art. And I was like, "Holy hell, what an impression. This is the sickest thing ever. I need some of these for the apartment that I just got because I just moved out and blah, blah, blah." Right. So I call Phil. I'm like, "Phil, these are amazing. A, where'd you get them? B, how much do they cost?" He goes, "Oh, I got this one here and I got this one there. And this one was 50 grand. This one was 100 grand. I'm like, "What? 50,000, 100,000? That's crazy." I'm like, I could do this. Wait a minute. I can do this. And so I started to do it. And I wasn't doing it for any other purpose besides myself. I just wanted cool art for my apartment. And so I started to do them. And then people were like, yo, this is sick. I'm like, how do we get one? I'm like, oh, yeah, selling one.
Yeah,
And so I
hello,
made
Leonardo
them.
DiCaprio.
Yeah, exactly, man. It all circles back, man. It all circles back. So I started to sell them like one after the other, after the other, after the other. And people were like, yo, this is sick. This is sick. This is sick. I'm like, okay, amazing. And I mean, lo and behold, today I'm here.
So, getting back to some of the things that you've done, some of the pieces that you've done depicting 80s
Mm,
and 90s, what, so one of the things that I notice in your work is how you lay it out. Now,
mm,
the beautiful piece behind you is not like
mm.
the pieces that I saw at Beauchamp
No,
Gallery in Toronto. It is
no.
more kind of symmetrical, organized. There's a certain way that light kind of casts upon it. Uh, I wanted to go into a bit about the thought process in how,
Mm,
say, a piece is organized and why certain things are in a certain place, the colors, the
sure.
light. Because for me, when I look at art, so, like you, I used to draw a lot as well when I was a kid. Even
Amazing.
now, I have a creative kind of side to it. I used to actually 10 years ago, after I got separated. I was on this kind of re finding myself journey, and I was actually making chandeliers out of canoes, right? And I was
Oh,
doing it
cool.
in a loft downtown Toronto. I'll send you some pictures. They were pretty cool. I was published in one magazine, but when I look at art, I look at how does it make me feel. I think a lot of people look at it in different ways, but for me, it's where does my eye fall and where is it drawn to? How does it make me feel, and how do I want to leave that piece of art, thinking a certain way that I do. And can you talk a bit more about those kind of elements, if those are the elements to your
Yeah,
pieces of
yeah, yeah,
work, or
absolutely.
how things fall into that?
Absolutely. Well, I'll use the Blockbuster Cinescape, I think, as a perfect example. I don't know if you want to throw it up here, like you could edit it in so the audience can see it.
Yeah. Hang on, let me see if I can find it. I'm on the Beauchamp gallery site,
So you
and
could go to my website, it might be easier.
okay,
Yeah,
hang on.
SQRA.com. But while you look for that, I'll kind of just give you the lowdown. But when I create any piece of art, there's a lot of things that come to mind. First of all, is organization, color, theme. All those things really matter. So by organization, I mean how large do I envision this piece to be? So first, I have to set up the parameters of that. So I always think about size first, so I know what I'm creating and I know the parameters in which I can play within. Then after that, I really go into the thematic. So the Blockbuster Cinescape, for example, if you look at it, and I'm sure you'll be able to pull it up any
Yep,
minute,
I'm pulling it up
but
shortly. Yep.
yeah, so you'll see that in the Blockbuster Cinescape that each row is actually, yeah. So if you go into Cinescapes, um, which is the top left,
Yep.
you'll see that each row is actually organized by theme. So if you look at yeah, so you could go to the last one there, bottom right. You'll see that the top left shelf there, where you see Coming to America and Dumb and Dumber, Happy Gilmore, all that. But like, in order to do this piece, for example, like I've been collecting VHS for so long, this is my collection, and I've gone to so many garage sales and marché aux puces, which is like the flea markets. And I mean, I've looked on Facebook Marketplaces, I've connected with collectors on YouTube and Reddit, and it's like all these different places in order to find the tapes that I want. I have many rare ones that are not featured here. Um, so yeah, so I collect all these different tapes, and when I organize them, there's a lot that goes into the consideration of it. And so you get into a lot of like your own personal experience, because if I love something, I figure someone else will love something. So it always comes down to that. It's like infusing your own personal experience. So there's like another piece that I just did in Los Angeles not long ago with a collector named Gabe Poncheska. And Gabe is great guy, man, great guy. He really gave me a lot of his time, a lot of his knowledge. But we did the cereal foodscape together. So if you want, you can
Yeah.
pop out of this one and show them. But if you go on the side pan, you go to Foodscape cereal. There you go. Go to Cereal Foodscape 2. So Gabe is he's a writer. I mean, he's written on, he did like a Wu-Tang documentary for HBO. He did he's written on House of the Dragon, so he's done some cool stuff. But Gabe has a serial dedicated YouTube channel that has, a bunch of thousands of followers. I think he has like over 1 million followers on TikTok. And he's been collecting cereal boxes for 20 years. And so we cataloged, I don't even know how many boxes, hundreds and hundreds of boxes. This is just one of the pieces that I made, but I'm going to do 10 to 20 pieces from his collection. But he's been collecting for 20 years. And so when I went to see him, with a very limited window of time to shoot, you rely a lot on the knowledge of the collectors in order to, get the right pieces together, put them, in the right order, etc. But really, man, you rely a lot on the collector's experience as well. Because when you walk in and you have really poor lighting conditions, you have a very limited amount of time, you've flown in from a different country in order to do this. It's just you're always under the gun, right? So
Yeah. Well, the one that I really also liked was, I mean, I liked a lot of them, was the bear, the ones that are the
with bear
toy.
bricks, yeah,
Yeah.
yeah, man. So that's actually, I think some of these bears are knockoffs, in fact, too, which are like always adds to the intrigue of the collection because you just have so many like interesting elements as to the collector's journey that put these pieces together. You know what I'm saying?
Yeah, and that's the thing too. I mean, that's what I find even just doing this podcast is not just the actual piece that you're working on, but it's talking to these people and getting the story behind it. You know, even when I
Absolutely.
did my crazy canoe stuff, I was just driving around all over Ontario buying old canoes, and some of them, most of them, were not usable. Right? They were, but they each had a story, and it was also just
Absolutely.
talking to the people and finding out their story. But and by the way, this is the first time I've done this sharing screen thing. It's pretty awesome. So
Yeah,
I,
it's not
I
bad.
do I do that for regular presentations with work and stuff. I've never thought to do it on the podcast. So thanks
No, for sure.
for
If it,
bringing that up.
yeah, man, if it adds value to the conversation, it's definitely a useful tool in this particular case to show off what we're talking about would really help the viewer if they've never seen what I do before.
And you know, when we talk about toys and 80s and the movies and the serials, you know, one of the things as well a lot of people may not realize is that the laws for children's programming changed in, I think it was the early 80s, whereby
Mm.
uh you can have, where say toy manufacturers could showcase their content via a show, right?
Mm.
And that show became a half an hour commercial for this toy,
Of course.
right?
That's
And
literally the
so
premise of Star Wars.
Star Wars, yeah, Star Wars has started off with the movies, and then you go into the 80s. There's Transformers, there's GI Joe, there's Voltron, Ninja Turtles, Gem, Barbie, all of these things, and then peppered in between were the cereal companies and any other products that I don't
Appeal to
feel.
children. Yeah,
Yeah, I don't feel that CPG has that similar impact with kids these days, because my daughter, who's 12, she's on, you know, she's on Instagram, not Instagram, YouTube a lot, and it's more kids advertising for kids, you know, opening up toys
absolutely.
and the unboxing.
Yeah. Like
It's really
Ryan's
changed.
World and all that jazz.
Yeah, it's really changed, and it's kind of yeah, it's kind of odd, you know, in terms of that. So the other thing I wanted to also ask you about, actually, maybe I'll throw it up as well, was your piece where you actually revealed it at the Beauchamp Gallery
Yes.
exhibit that I attended, which
Yes.
was the television series, right? And
Yeah, the
were you
television
able?
light box.
Yeah, that was pretty amazing. And I
So
wanted to
that one's
talk.
actually it's
Yeah,
actually under light boxes right above that.
got it.
There it
So
is.
so this one I really wanted to kind of pick your brain on, because
Sure.
for people who are listening to this and not looking at this podcast, what, well, Cedric, you explain it in terms of what you did here.
Sure. Basically, what we did here is that each one of these TVs was individually shot, right? And they're all old retro TVs, as you can see.
Yeah, so
They were
it's
individual.
a collage of different TVs, right?
Yeah,
Yeah.
yeah, exactly. So each TV was individually shot and obviously colored because the colors, were certainly were not like this back in the day. Most of these are brown and stuff, so we colored them to make them cooler and fit my aesthetic. But each one of these TVs was individually shot and recomposed in 3D. However, in this particular case, I created a matte mask. Where every single TV screen is. And, and then we enclose all of that into a frame. And so it turns into a light box. However, when you turn the piece on, only the TV screens and not the TV set itself glow. And it creates this like really beautiful aesthetic, you know, uh, like this tapestry of 80s, well, I mean, of amazing iconic moments through time.
Yeah.
So,
And some of the ones that stick out to me. So the Tiananmen Square, the
yeah.
Challenger exploding. I remember watching it in grade 3. I think I was. We were all sitting by the TV watching the Challenger take off, and then the thing exploded, and my teacher just shut the TV off, and we were wondering what the hell just happened, right? And
Wow.
and I'm like, man. 3 years before this, I just escaped a civil war from Sri Lanka, and now I'm seeing this. I'm like,
Jeez.
man, this is like what kind of world are we living in, right? But
Yeah.
other key things is Steve Jobs releasing the iPhone, Martin Luther King landing on the moon, Michael Jackson, Kurt Cobain, Evander Holyfield getting his ear bitten off. There was
Nine
one
11.
9/11. There was one though. Oh yes, the one where the man set himself on fire. Where was that one? Was that Vietnam?
So that was in protest of the war, and it was a Buddhist, I think it was a Buddhist monk who lit himself on fire in order to protest. Which was, I think this moment was in, like, not all of these moments were in fact televised. I just felt that they were so iconic that they
Mm,
should be in one of these TVs. Like, I
hmm.
don't think that the Steve Jobs video was actually televised. I think it was, like on the internet only, even at the
Okay,
time.
right.
But doesn't really matter. But yeah, that moment and that photo I found so powerful, that it should have been included.
And apparently he sat there in silence. Like
Yeah,
whenever we see on in movies and stuff, if somebody's being
self-immolation.
burned,
Yeah,
they're
yeah.
screaming and they're yelling, but this guy just sat there in silence. And I don't even know if you hope to God we never know what this feels like, but I don't even
God
know
forbid.
if you can even scream if you're in so much pain, right? Or if
Oh,
ever,
you can
yeah,
scream, man. You can. I mean, in fact,
really.
there was a guy that recently did it outside the White House, wasn't there? He set himself on fire.
Oh, really?
Yeah, yeah, and he was he was screaming, man.
Man,
That did,
yeah.
yeah. But yeah, listen, there are minds that are so powerful that they can exit their body, right? There are so many
Yeah.
different planes of existence and dimensions of existence where the consciousness can travel to. Same thing when you dream, they can
Yeah.
exit their body and they no longer. I don't know that they no longer feel the pain, but they're so powerful in their mind that not even flames in the throes of death will make them react.
Yeah. No, absolutely. Absolutely. I'm going to change gears a bit. And,
So
when I met you, as we've talked about a few times, I met you in this beautiful gallery in Toronto on King Street. You had a lot of people show up, a lot of people interested in your work, you, nice wine and nice drinks flowing and everything. And I came and I saw, wow, beautiful pieces. They're very expensive. I can't afford them.
appreciate it.
And I see this guy who's very successful. I wanted to ask, has your journey been very linear? Have there
Oh,
been times where it's just been really shit? And
yeah.
how do you still, well, what happened first of all, and how do you still dig down deep to that 8, 9 year old Cedric that said, there's a bigger purpose for me here, and you keep on going? Can you talk about some of those times?
Yeah, absolutely, man. So I mean, like, my journey has been anything but linear, and I feel it's still not linear. And every single month and every single day that passes, we all feel, I think, no matter what you do, man, but you feel a little bit of imposter syndrome, and you feel
Mm,
uneasy and nervous, and that's part of the game. I think one really important realization I had a long time ago, I think maybe when I was 18, 19, 20 years old, is that, well, two things. Number one, nobody knows what the hell they're doing. Every single day is a learning experience. Every single day will pose new challenges, and if it doesn't, then you're doing something wrong in your life. So that's number one. Number two, I realized that this entire world doesn't exist, and the only person who exists in this world is me. And in your world, the only person that exists is you. And in anybody else's world, everybody is the main character in their own story. And when you die, the game is over. They say, "Oh, well, the world goes on with or without you." No, I disagree. I think the world ends when you end. When our consciousness ends. And I think that everything ahead of us is a fabrication of our mind. So that gives me a lot of strength in realizing that my thoughts form my reality. um, so when things don't go right, I dig deep. I dig deep and have faith. Honestly, I have faith in God, and I have faith in the capacities in which He gave me. And that's not to say that it's a blind faith, because I really truly believe that God helps those who help themselves. But the universe is a giving force. It is not. It is not a malevolent or malicious force. I believe there are malicious forces that exist, and that there are, even entities on different planes of consciousness that want to see you fail, and they manifest in different ways, and that's often through drugs, escapism, junk food, pornography, all sorts of different malevolent forces that manifest in a physical way in order to detract you from where you're going. And so when you're able to see that very clearly and push it to the side and elevate yourself in a space that gives you confidence and faith and strength, then I think everything after that is just a matter of putting the pedal to the metal, so to speak. You give everything that you've got, and you do the best that you can with the tools that you have until it goes right. And if it doesn't go right, there will be a lesson within all of it in order to point you, to your personal true north, so to speak. Um, and a great example of that, man, is that when I was working on that app that I told you about, that dating app there, Be My Guest, things were going great. And then suddenly things were not going great. And I found myself engaged to my wife. Um, I found myself broke. I had $200 in my bank account. Uh, I had a wedding coming up. I had a pending, mortgage that needed to be paid off, and I was in a big hole due to a lot of different decisions, right? So, but that never really detracted me from knowing that everything would be okay. And I remember, in fact, a very distinct moment where the little money that I had left, literally $200 left in my bank account, and I'd spent it on a gift for a friend. And when I gave him that gift, the purpose of it was to say that, like, money doesn't matter as long as you have that vigor and that determination and passion, it'll come back. And that was like not only was it a gift for my friend, despite what I had, and that was not even long ago, man. That was 7, 8 years ago, maybe, yeah, 8 years ago. It was a lesson a lesson in belief to myself that you could spend everything you have and remake it and rebuild it.
Mm-hmm.
And yeah, so it's just like you just have to have faith sometimes, man. You have to have faith. And I think a lot of people today are determined by the things that they accomplish and not the things that they believe. And that takes away a lot of your power, because your greatest adventure is around the corner. It's not behind you, it's ahead of you.
Thanks for sharing that. I think one of the things too is we become very kind of sedentary in sometimes the lives that we lead, and we stop realizing the importance of believing in ourselves because we've ticked a lot of the boxes along the way. Maybe we've got an education, we got a job, we got married, we got a house, we got a mortgage, it's just tick, tick, tick. And things just kind of, a lot of people just carry on doing the same thing for a long time, and they're not forced to they're not thrown into a struggle, they're not forced into change. And in my life I've had many changes. This is what this show is about, really. At the end of the day,
Yeah,
it
yeah,
it
absolutely.
it is about change comes to you whether you like it or not, right? And sometimes that you put yourself in that position, and sometimes life puts you in that position, or whatever it is. But at the end of the
100%.
day, everything happens because of decisions we've made. There's the accountability, but there's also the believing in yourself factor. And as long as you believe in yourself and you have a good support network, and as you said, you're a good person, And you don't just start becoming a good person when you just need stuff, right? And I realized when I lost my job in November, I I realized throughout my life I've met amazing people, and then I realized more after this happened that all those people really stepped up for me, and I have some amazing friends, and they all believe in me, and they
Amazing.
all want me to succeed. And I have an amazing wife and an amazing child, and I come home, at the beginning when something happens like that, you have trouble putting your head down at the end of the day and being able to rest, but knowing you have a good ecosystem of support. And at the end of the day, that drive, right? That killer instinct that, you know what? This is not where it ends. This is not
Yeah,
the
but
not like these 80s movies, you're down but you get up, Rocky 4, that type of
yeah.
thing, right? And you keep going. So that's awesome. Just to kind of round that off. So going from that point to just getting to um, what did the next 5 years look like for you, right? Just going from there, did you get into this level of art very quickly to be able
No,
to?
so I've been so look when I left that job when I left that job it was first of all it wasn't even a job, it was more like a partnership, right, in that app. um I was faced with the reality of I had very little coming in at the time, but I had a lot of responsibilities mounting, quicker than I could handle them. So I immediately, I had been doing art for like I think five or so years already at that time. So I was already in it, but I wasn't making a sustainable living out of it yet, and I was still establishing my brand, figuring out, how to leverage social media. And I've never been a stranger to media in general, right? So like how to get my work seen, etc. Like I've produced videos that have, I don't know, I haven't checked in a long time, but 50 to 100 million views, right, on stuff that I've produced that don't have any launching platforms. That wasn't for massive brands; they were for new artists and blah blah blah. So, I was no stranger to that, but I was figuring out how to leverage it for myself. Um, but from there, I mean, like I had worked for a company for a short period of time on contract called Goldcast, which was like motivational content. They're very big on YouTube. I had worked for Ubisoft and done some like, I directed some trailers for games. Um, there was just I when the pandemic hit, all the galleries had closed and my sales had come to a screeching halt. So I
Mhm.
actually embarked on a venture with a friend of my father's who was in the furniture industry. And so when I got into the furniture industry, which was not glamorous at all, it taught me a lot of valuable lessons in terms of organization and execution and distribution and import and export, and I mean all sorts of different things that I realized I needed to apply to my art business. And as I took all the lessons from those different jobs, whether it was content creation or, like sourcing and input and import and distribution and blah, blah, I realized that all those were feeding my art business. And I learned that the art business is a business. And I think that a lot of artists don't understand that. You are not an artist, you are a salesman. And whether your art is good or bad, it is completely subjective to the eye of the beholder. And if you don't know how to do business and structure your business like a business, you will fail. And the further along that went, like after like COVID hit, had to get a job, all the galleries were closed. I went to the furniture industry, which was considered essential. I used the time and the experience, etc., to leverage my art business until I finally had going to a point where I could leave that and focus on my goal 100% of the time. um, it took a while, but I realized that whether or not you work for yourself or somebody else, if you don't have systems in place, you are going to fail. And so I used all of that experience to build out systems to maximize the potential of what I was trying to build for myself. Does that make sense?
When you say systems, what do you mean? What's an
I mean,
example?
when I wake up in the morning, right? Like, well, obviously, you take care of all the stuff that you got to take care of. You take care of the kids, you bring them to school, you get them dressed, right? But then your clock starts. Like, all right, my clock is going to start every single day at 9:30. Clock into the office, and it may end at 4. It may end at 4, which is a short day because I'm usually, I used to work from 8:30 to 4 or 5 o'clock in the morning when I didn't have kids, right? So my life is significantly different now that I have children. But I built a system that I clock into the office at 9:30. Nobody disturbs me in between then. From 9:30 to 10:30, I will put together a reel for the following day, or I will have to, like I typically make like a content calendar in order to release, right? But polish off the reel for the next day. All right, from 10:30 to 1 p.m., I will work on this bit of art. After I do that bit of art, from I'll maybe have a little bit of lunch, and then from 2 o'clock to 3 o'clock, I'm going to review all my accounting, and then from 3 o'clock to 4 o'clock, I need to see which orders are going out, make sure that all the certificates are signed, make sure that all the crates are built, make sure that all the everything's been transported to the warehouse for shipping. So you have like very particular systems to be sure that you're achieving what you want to achieve. And if you don't have that framework, then what ends up happening is that you clock into the office at 9:30, you're like, all right, well, what do I do now? Like, what's my day look like? And if
Yeah.
you haven't forecasted your day, you're going to find yourself spending a lot of time on YouTube, spending a
Yeah.
lot of time on Facebook or Instagram or TikTok, and you're going to find yourself really distracted by your spouse that may walk in and ask you if you can hold the baby for 5 or 10 minutes, and you may get hungry and step out for a half an hour lunch that turns into an hour and a half at your favorite burrito place or whatever the hell it is. And so that is where a lot of entrepreneurs will fail in their business, is that you work for yourself, but you are your own boss. And if you don't set those parameters for yourself, you're dead in the water, man. You're dead in the water because your day has no structure. And that's why a lot of people enjoy working for other people, not because they like going to the office, not because they have a steady paycheck. It's because they don't have to think. They
Hmm.
go into the office, they do what they got to do. I understand why it works for so many. And it worked for me for a long time, until you have that gnawing feeling of, like, that life isn't really complete, or you're not really following the path that you want. But it always comes down to, like, some people have the ability to self dictate their lives and some people don't. And that's okay either way. But no matter what you do, you have to be content with who you are, and you have to have enough self-awareness to know who you are and where you're going and what you're doing. Time is a precious resource, man. Once it's gone, it's gone. And the
Yeah.
days are short. No matter how much time you have, the days are short.
I agree, and you're right. I mean, even after I lost my job, I was still getting up at 5:30. I was doing meditations. I take the dog for a walk.
Key,
I
key.
take my daughter to school, and then I was networking my ass off, and connecting with people. I was going downtown 3 times a day. I met with 40 people in 4 weeks, right, between
Amazing.
lunches, coffees, dinners, and holiday parties, all of those things. And you're right, we are our own product, right? You get out of us what we put in, right? And especially if you're an artist or an entrepreneur, and I think maybe what you're also trying to say as an artist is both.
Yeah.
We are hunter gatherer, right? We are out there. I had this conversation with somebody else. We eat so freely because we can just go in a grocery store and buy whatever we want. But
I was just having this
you know
conversation. Yeah,
yeah,
exactly.
prehistoric man ate meat when they caught it. And it took you sometimes 2 weeks to catch meat, and you were eating berries and twigs till you actually caught meat. And when you ate it, you ate a lot of it, and then you would go days without, or weeks without, having to catch meat again. But you ate what you kill. You literally eat what you kill.
Yeah.
The other thing I wanted to ask you was the impact of AI in art. And I see
Yeah.
it impacting the type of art that you do, because there's a digital component in terms of organizing it, and maybe doing some of the editing and things of that nature. And we touched on this earlier, where a lot of things are curated for us, right? We're moving to a world, or we are in a world, where we listen to the type of music Spotify tells us we should be listening to. We're watching on YouTube what YouTube tells us what we should be watching based on our behavior. And then also based on the algorithms clustering our personality traits based on what we watch. And to me, we're getting to that point where at some point there's going to be a breaking point of, okay, too much is being told to me as to what I should be eating or doing or all of these things. What do you think the impact of AI on art is, and how do you see it influencing things? Are there good things to it? What are there bad things to it?
Yeah.
What are your thoughts?
So, I mean, at this particular point, before we enter, a more advanced world of AGI and all that jazz, at this particular point, I see AI really just as a tool, like any other tool. Um, it poses a threat to a lot of artists um, who do a particular kind of work, but I think that it can be leveraged also by artists in order to fast track the type of art that they want to try, without necessarily having to put pen to paper, so to speak. For me, in my particular work, it has helped a lot because I've been able to, for example, take photos of somebody's or have somebody take photos of their collection prior to me flying out somewhere to see them, and then I could dump those photos into uh, ChatGPT, for example, and GPT may be able to sort through the collection for me, sorted by year, sorted by title, sorted by color, sorted by whatever it is, in order to help me kind of like put structure to a piece. I think that my particular art, well, I mean, I do a lot of different art, right? I do the neon and the diamond dust and and gold leaf stuff and light boxes and the acrylics. But the photography, which is what I really like, a little bit AI proof, in the sense that AI does not have the capacity to regurgitate, first of all, copyrighted or license, sorry, or copyrighted imagery. So, like, I did a piece, for example, with Gary Fang, who's the largest Coke can collector in the world, and Gary's been collecting for 20 plus years, maybe 25 years now. And you could not recreate those images. You could not create an entire series of particular Coke cans that were released, like through the years of 1987 and 1995 with AI, no matter how sophisticated it gets, because A, it'll be protected by copyright, B, it's impossible to get the details right, etc. So a lot of what I do in capturing like the nostalgia is protected from that in my particular form of art. Um, but at the same time, like I think like there are many different artists that exist that will create directly with AI, and then they might print that and they might paint on top of that, or they might like they might shatter glass on top of it, or they might burn it, or they might manipulate, or might print it and then blow torch it and then reshape it in a way that they want. There are so many different ways to use it that I think that the world will come to a point where they recognize AI art, but recognize also that it is a tool like any other. It's a form of expression. And if you can use it to elevate your creativity and then transform it, then it'll have just as much value as anything else that you may have painted. But like somebody writing a letter, or who's trying to be eloquent, who may not have a vast vocabulary, who needs a synonym for a particular word. If you're going into Word and you're typing something out and you right click and then you click synonym, what's the difference? You were a poet, but a poet with a limited vocabulary, and now you're using a suggestion from a computer. What's the difference at the end of the day, right? It's like
Yeah.
there's no limits on this stuff. But I think that AI at this point is a positive force.
Yeah, it also art represents particular time in civilization,
Yeah,
right? And where people were painting on caves thousands of years ago, and now art is evolving into a different medium or adding another medium, if we
for
will,
sure,
right? Is there
for
anyone
sure.
historically that you would have loved to have collaborated with, or that you draw inspiration from for your work as an artist?
Uh, Yeah, would it be amazing to have Keith Haring draw like his figures on my like boombox piece and have them hanging off my boombox? Would it be amazing to, to have Andy Warhol paint a bunch of like different cartoon characters on Campbell's soup cans and then I photograph them? Yeah, that'd be amazing. Like there's so many. I would love to work with these people, but the styles don't necessarily jive, like I feel like every artist has their own thing. It's like and you take what you can from different artists, but I don't think there's anyone like that I'm like dying to work with, because my my raison d'être, like my reason for what I do, is not a collaborative effort. It's more of a singular effort to uh, recapture the sense of youth and nostalgia that made me who I am. Um, but yeah, it's always fun to think about, you know. So it's always fun to think about.
I have two more questions for you before we wrap up.
Sure.
What is the message? What is the legacy you hope to leave behind when you're no longer on this earth, as we all will
Yeah,
have
man.
our day? But what is the message that you want to leave with your work?
I think I think the message is, don't forget your youth. You know, don't forget your youth as you grow old, because you only grow old really when you forget your youth, right? So I'll be a kid forever. I don't care how old I am. I'll be a kid forever, man. I'll always be that kid who loved, Saturday morning cartoons, who was reading the back of the cereal boxes, who was, playing trading card games. Um, and no matter how old I get, I never want to lose that sense of wonder and that sense of magic.
Last question is, this is going to be a tough one. All right.
Sure.
What's your favorite 80s movie?
Oof. My favorite 80s movie? I think maybe Stand By Me.
Oh, that's a really
Yeah.
good one. I would have to say mine would be The Goonies,
Yeah, of
and
course. Yeah.
I enjoyed the movie. I definitely enjoyed the movie, but I think I enjoy it more so for the fact that my daughter loves it and we watch it
Mm,
together. Like, we've watched it so many times, and I
that's
think
cool.
the fact that we both share this kind of gives it another meaning for me. So she's buying all those Funko Pop Goonies characters now. They're in her room
Nice.
and stuff. Yeah, yeah.
How old's your
So
daughter?
she's 12.
Oh, wow.
Yeah, but
Amazing.
we I think first time we watched it, she was like 10. Cedric, I wanted to thank you for your time
My
today.
pleasure.
I
Likewise.
yeah, I have to say, from the moment that I met you at that gallery exhibit last fall, my wife was there, and one of my really close friends with his wife, and you have this rare gift, which is, I've only seen very few people have it, and strong people with strong leadership have it, which is to be in a crowded room, but when you talk to somebody, make that person feel like they're the only person in the room. And it's a very,
Appreciate that.
very special gift to have. And I appreciate the time that you made for me today. I'd love sharing your story and hearing about it as well. So thank you for joining me today.
Thank you, man. I appreciate it, Steve.
And that's a wrap on today's episode of My Life After. Huge thanks to SQRA for sharing his incredible journey from hustling bootleg posters to selling his art for five figures. If there's one thing to take away, it's that betting on yourself, even when you're down, can lead to something bigger than you ever imagined. If you enjoyed this episode, make sure to subscribe, leave a review, and share it with somebody who needs that extra push to chase their dreams. This episode was brought to you by Heal3, supporting your path to better health and wellness. Until next time, I'm Steve Joseph, and this is My Life After. Keep pushing forward.